Welcome to our webinar on how to visually portray extreme heat and why we need to get it right. My name's Lori Gehring. I'm a longtime climate change journalist, and I'm the extreme heat editor for Climate Resilience for All, which is a women-founded and women-led global organization focused on strengthening and supporting the health and work of women and vulnerable communities facing extreme heat. Extreme heat disproportionately harms women, hurting their health and ruining their finances. Part of Climate Resilience for All's mission is to improve understanding about heat risks and journalistic reporting on this threat and what can be done about it. And that's why we're here today. On a day it's expected to be 31 degrees Celsius in London and pretty hot where a lot of our panelists are today. That counts as a heat wave here, and I know a lot of you are seeing even hotter temperatures where you are. Over the next hour, we're going to briefly go through some guidelines we've developed to help journalists think about how to reframe coverage of heat, away from the old images we all know of people eating ice cream and frolicking in the sun and splashing in fountains, toward images that better reflect the growing risks of extreme heat and how to manage them. Then we're going to move into a discussion about how photographers and photo editors are rethinking extreme heat images and trying to stay safe themselves while shooting them. We have some great panelists here today who are at the forefront of photographing extreme heat or figuring out how to reshape heat coverage by news outlets and agencies. They include Bhumika Saraswati, an Indian photographer and filmmaker who's made extreme heat a focus of her work. Ali Withers, who oversaw efforts by Thomson Reuters news agency to rethink climate visuals around heat. Thomas Coex, the chief photographer for Spain and Portugal for Agence France Presse, who is dealing with extreme heat on an almost daily basis with his team. And Olivia Ackland, a journalist and photographer covering Africa and the Middle East, who's photographed extreme heat in both those regions. After our panel, we'll save a bit of time for your questions. Please feel free to put those in the Q&A function of this Zoom event at the bottom of your screen. Don't put them in the chat. We'll save that for other uses. And we'll see how many of them we can get through before we run out of time. We're recording this session today. I hope that is okay. If it's not, please feel free to leave it. We're just hoping to make this available to people who are not in the right time zone to have seen it today. So let's get started. Kelechuku, who's one of my colleagues, could you put up the first slide? Extreme heat is now the biggest killer among climate extreme events, but the scale and seriousness of the threat is really hard to portray visually, not least because heat is largely invisible, unlike other climate extremes such as floods and storms. Many who suffer heat impacts do so indoors, out of the public eye. How can photographers and videographers accurately portray heat as a serious risk that it is? Here are a few of our ideas. First, avoid visuals that downplay the danger. Extreme heat increasingly is not fun. Images of people splashing in fountains, swimming at beaches and in pools are a long-time staple of stories about heat waves and hot days. These are easy to shoot, particularly at short notice. They can make for bright, colorful pictures that clients like, but they're not a full or accurate reflection of the growing level of risk associated with extreme heat. Portraying heat simply as fun can reduce perceptions of it and miss an opportunity to help people better understand a growing threat. Next is that extreme heat is more than a weather story. Photographs of it should not just be standalone weather pictures, but instead tell stories about how high temperatures affect aspects of everyday life, from health and transport to jobs and business. They should be engaging, easy to relate to, and provide enough context, detail, and nuance. Next is focusing on the most affected. Creating these visuals isn't easy, as our panelists, I'm sure, will tell you. But thinking about who might be struggling most on a hot day can really help. That could be outdoor laborers, construction workers, delivery people, police, ambulance crews, firefighters, traffic wardens, farmers. Or it could be people working inside without adequate cooling, like factory warehouse workers. Also highly at risk are the elderly and disabled people, very young children, pregnant women, homeless people, migrants, the very poor, and those affected by cultural or physical restrictions. that prevent them from leaving their homes to seek cooling or removing heat-trapping clothing. Next is accurately portraying impacts for average people. That might be families that are sitting outside seeking shade because they don't have fans or air conditioning in their homes, or medical workers trying to treat people with heat stroke, sweating outdoor workers trying to do their jobs without adequate protection, or students sitting in classrooms taking exams in sweltering situations, commuters packed on hot trains, or delivery drivers carrying packages in the heat. We would encourage you to show both the impacts and the solutions. It's really nice to combine those together. That could be showing people, anything from sitting in the shade or shade, under shade structures or trees, to having access to water, warning signs with advice for residents, people sitting in cooling centers, people wearing cooling vests or taking more frequent breaks, that kind of thing. The problem is that images of heat, like many climate extreme events, can be really emotionally powerful, and it can get to be overwhelming for audiences who can turn away from a lot of bad images. So coupling them with visuals of concrete actions that people can take to lower the risk is really helpful. Again, think about your audience. It may sound obvious, but it's worth thinking about the extreme heat related problems your particular audience faces. Maybe that's long, hot commutes or work in an inadequately cooled warehouse or a factory that's the local employer. Focusing on those and efforts to reduce that heat are going to really ring a bell with your audience. Um, Rethink when to shoot. We were just talking about how shooting heat images during the hottest part of the day is a normal thing that's done, but heat is now affecting people much longer periods of each day, including at night, when they struggle to sleep, and they may be, all sorts of related problems to that, like more domestic violence or just deteriorating mental health. It's really worth thinking about how you can tell news stories that show the wide-ranging impacts of heat. The other thing you need to do is build sources and seek access ahead of time. You need to treat extreme heat like other stories that require detailed forward planning and ongoing work to cover effectively. It can be difficult to get a hospital, an ambulance crew, or a care home to allow you to shoot on a very hot day, especially when they're really busy. But if you approach officials and institutions ahead of the heat season, explain why you're trying to portray this, and build relationships with them, you may find that the access is easier on a hot day. And that'll put you in a position to tell the stories you want to do. Um, Take care of yourself. Extreme heat can be debilitating or deadly, not just for the people you're photographing, but for you on a hot day. Remember to take regular breaks, drink lots of water, wear cool clothing, stay in the shade as much as possible, and pay attention to how you're feeling as you work. And lastly, think about your equipment. We're hearing more and more that extreme heat is making smartphones, cameras, drones, and other devices overheat and stop working. So it's really worth thinking in advance about how you might keep your equipment cool and functioning in these hot situations, or to have backup equipment on hand, just having multiples of things or cooling packs so you can swap out. Now, I want to show you a couple of the images our panelists have created or edited as part of their work on rethinking heat visuals. What do you think? I'm happy to hear your reactions in the chat if you'd like to share them. I think some of these really very well reflect some of the things we've been talking about with these guidelines. Thanks, Kelechiku. That last one is one of mine, actually. I ride the Northern Line in London. If any of you have ever done that, it's unair conditioned and absolutely brutal in hot weather. So we're seeing more and more people like this really suffering a bit on the tube. Let's get on to our panel. And please remember to put any questions that you have for them into the Q&A channel as we go along. Ali, I wanted to start with you first. I know Reuters has been rethinking its heat images for a couple of years now. What made you do that, and how has it been going?
Hey everyone, nice to be here. So yeah, I can just talk a little bit about this. So in 2023, when I joined Reuters, 2023 was, I mean, just off the charts hot. Partly because of the El Nino effect, went on to be the hottest year on record, which was then usurped by last year, 2024. So it was just in the news everywhere. And actually, the head of photos at Reuters sort of sent out this note one day that was like, could we all stop going to zoos? And I was like, what? Because it had not occurred to I was like, what is he talking about zoos? And I went on the wire and looked, and I was like, there's all these. This is, I'm sorry if anyone has ever been sent to a zoo to cover animals drinking ice lollies. It's not a knock against it. I just didn't realize that this was kind of a cliche photo. So that afternoon, I wrote down probably 2 dozen different ideas for what you could do for heat. And a lot of them Lori actually just went over. So different people, different scenarios, and those sort of got sent out to the newsroom. And from there, we started also commissioning stories, bureau stories, and it really became something that we also built into our planning. So having bureaus monitor their weather and go forward with it. And it was I can't, because I only joined Reuters in 23, I can't really speak to how it was done beforehand, but my feeling was like it looks irresponsible if we're talking about extreme heat and we're portraying sort of fun in the sun imagery. And we know with climate change that these temperatures are obviously not normal. So it isn't, it's climate change isn't it's very serious. So we have to also represent it seriously. And I think bureaus and photographers and VJs and producers really responded to that. And so every summer in the Northern Hemisphere and then the flip for the other, we sort of go through this exercise of sending out this list again and starting this.
So you're really seeing them change now. The images you're producing are quite different, or
Yeah,
is it
I would say
about?
well, again, I can't speak to the before, but there's certainly quite a breadth that I see go on the wire. I mean, there are still zoo photos going out. Because clients will actually like I think this is something that we also have to keep in mind that there are still clients who want, beach photos
Mm.
and ice cream photos and kind of these simple things that work. But certainly I see a lot of people go through some of these steps like sourcing and planning and building that access to sort of tell a more nuanced story, which is it maybe speaks to also this webinar, like we're in mid-July, but we still have quite a few months of heat left to go. So you kind of like refine your storytelling tools as the season evolves and look to see, well, what else could I do next time there's a heat wave? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think, Thomas, I'm going to come to you then because I know you were telling me that clients do sometimes want these old kind of pictures, and you have photographers out in really hot summer temperatures. How easy or hard is it to get these images that show heat? And what are some of the problems doing it, including what your clients might want?
So yeah, so it's very complex because cli clients like also the cliche pictures, and so it's difficult to offer something else, and but we have to offer something else, and we have to educate them with new pictures, new part of the It's a problem. It's not only as you say, people with ice cream and people at the swimming pool, and people suffering about this, and to illustrate this, it depends also where you are on the planet. Each country has its own heat wave alert level. So it's not the same here. I'm sure it's not the same in India. In Middle East, it's also another level. And So, and in London, for sure, I don't know if it's the, the most important news this day, but in Spain, for example, so we have heat wave since more than 40 days, and it was on the news only one day. Because
Really?
because it's finally it's normal. And I saw in France, I saw at the same time, and the temperature was less, but it was during 1 week the news in the newspaper and on TV. So it depends where you are, and so but you have
Yeah,
to.
it's really interesting because we just saw that report out from scientists in Europe saying that I think we're supposed to see a huge increase in heat deaths in Europe. By 2070, I think it's a 50-fold increase. So, the heat really does actually deserve the attention. I think people think they know how to manage it, and in the end, they don't. One of the things you were telling me about I found really interesting is that you said when you go out in the hot part of the day to shoot heat images, it's only tourists out there because
Yeah,
much of the population is inside at the hot hours.
yeah, because okay, it's unusual to have this heat wave in June, but people are ready to live with it because it's in July and August. But so everything is so it's Western Europe. So you have a lot of buildings with air conditioning, with all the equipment we need, and or people stay at the swimming pool because you have a lot of swimming pool in the residences, and so it's only the problem. It's only for the workers, but they adapt the timetable for the workers in the streets. So if you go to photography with people at midday, you find no one.
Mm. Yeah, I know. And I think one of the problems facing all photographers on this is that, so, as we noted earlier, a lot of people die of heat in their homes if you're not lucky
Mm.
enough to have air conditioning or enough cooling. And it can be quite hard to get access to those places to kind of tell that story.
Yeah,
Bhumika,
it's
go ahead.
so sorry. No, it's just also for that. It's in Spain, for example, the store reopen afternoon, not before 5 or 6 p.m.
Yeah.
until 8 or 9. So they adapt their life. Also, it's why in the street you have only foreign tourists.
Yeah, so interesting. Bhumika, you've really focused on how heat affects the most vulnerable communities. Tell us about some of that work and how do you handle photographing people who may be really struggling? What are the kind of ethics and the approach around that?
Okay, I think, first of all, one thing that distinguishes me with a lot of breaking news photographers is that I spend long-term time with specific theme and with people and communities. And I think that really helps, like being on ground and knowing the community, building those connections before, not just when the heat arrives. Because suddenly all editors want photos of heat one day all of a sudden. And then you're like, how do you get a photo in a single day, of and then especially in India and especially in all of South Asia, if you just Google heat wave India or however, the amount of dehumanizing visuals that exist where you know that there is no connection between the photographer and the community. The person who has been photographed is this is non-consensual. You can just see the visual and make out that this is not consensual. This is just random poor looking person who had to be photographed for heat has been photographed. And that sort of work, and I was with the Associate Press that time, and I was really irritated one day with this news about, oh, 117 people died of heat in India. And I was like, yeah, but what do these 117 people die? Like, who are these 117 people? They are not clearly you and me. And why are these 117 people just numbers, And I was like, and what do they look like? Who are they? Are these women? Are these men? What caste location do they come from? What are they? What work do they do? It just can't be a news about, oh, 117 people died of heat. Who? 117 people. And I think that really affected me because because the sort of social strata that I also come from within India, those 117 people could be my relative, could be somebody I know. So this really irked me, and I was like, okay, this year I'm going to plan, to do, visual. I will go and I will meet people and I will do a dedicated reportage on heat. And when I was on ground, people are mostly willing to be photographed. Like, it's not if you just take consent, people are more than happy to be sharing their sharing their day's course with you. And I decided that I'm not just going to photograph in urban centers, I'm also going to go to rural India, because that's where a lot of things are happening. So I'll just show you, for example, this photo. There is, I'm not sure how clear it is, but this is Darshana. This is a lady in rural India, and all of these are destroyed crops. These are all fallen wheat crops. And it happened because there was a sudden rains in the middle of a heat wave. And this is clearly related to the climate crisis, and which is why heat is not just a weather story, as we had mentioned in the guideline. It's not just, oh, this day it is. It's also about how many crops did we lose this day. This India did not reach its wheat target this year, like, in 2023 when I shot this one. And I feel like those connections can only be built if you work on it deliberately, with sensitivity, with rigor, and in longer term duration. And I think that's just the sort of work that I did. And I was too angry with the desensitization, so I was like, why can't people be photographed like this? Why can't women be photographed like this? I understand that it is extreme heat, I understand, but there are still women in the farms who are sowing your and mine food, at the same time, in the same temperature, because some of them do not have the luxury of being inside. As simple as that. And here, if you see, to protect these women, to protect themselves in extreme heat, there is an additional layer of clothing on the head, there is an additional layer of clothing over the traditional clothes, a man's worn out shirt, for example. So the measures, women have been taking to maybe help themselves in the middle of heat. So I found stories in those details, like those details that revealed subtler patriarchy, subtler, subtle stories of caste discrimination within. So, for example, this is another from the same field. For example, this is another woman who works in, another woman, and Sudarshana, her name is, and she is actually wearing winter gloves in 50-degree Celsius temperature in the middle of a heat wave.
Why?
Because we have not provided our people with safety equipments. We also have to understand what part of the world are we talking about. Are labor laws in place? In a place where, and also all of the photographs I'm showing you are of Dalit women, of a community that is considered quote unquote untouchable in India. There is a clear segregation, which is the caste system that exists within India. And while we speak about climate, weather, and heat, I also feel these also become, a micro, a better way to also look at these already existing social inequalities. A heat wave reveals a much, much deeper, like COVID revealed much deeper inequalities that existed in our society about who gets access or not. I think it's the same with heat wave. So, and then we talk about 117 people dying of heat. But how? This is how. If you won't give the right safety equipments to your communities, to your workers, obviously, they will fall sick. And this is just one part of it. I think I just wrap it up also, in especially when I was speaking to other women, especially in urban India, a lot of women reported of having additional UTIs, additional urinary tract infections, because a lot of working women could just not access water. As simple as that. And in a society like India, South Asia, that is so deeply, entrenched with caste system, you cannot just drink water at somebody's home. It's just not, and so in the middle of all of this, when a woman who is a working class woman cannot access immediate water, and or immediate access to toilet, when you're a working class woman who's not allowed to use the same toilet as the person you're working, whose home you're working in, what does that do to your body? It makes you sick. You get recurring UTIs and multiple other health issues, which just came about in the reporting that I was doing. So just.
It is really interesting how extreme heat, like a lot of other climate impacts, really does amplify the risks that are already there. You see, we know about the urban heat island effect. Often that's hardest in poor neighborhoods at the center of the city where there's poor airflow, where there's very few trees, where there isn't much ability to escape. You know, these are useful places to look around for the story that you might want to tell about heat risk, I think. And also this point about how it is crossing with other problems. You know, we often see, we're seeing it here in London, that extreme heat is linked to things like drought and worsening wildfire risk. You're certainly seeing that in Spain and Portugal, I know. And, you know, it can be useful, I think, as you think about the images to just begin tying those things together because they do go together. And I think your point about looking at local adaptation, even if it's, you know, people are trying to deal with this problem. They're not sitting around and just suffering or dying. They're doing what they can. Sometimes people have quite interesting and clever local ways of dealing with heat, which I think can be interesting stories. You know, otherwise, other examples, you get that kind of maladaptation that Vivek has just been talking about, where you don't really have any choice, so you end up wearing 3 shirts, which I would be hard pressed to think is going to make you much cooler on a hot day. You had one more thing to say, Bima?
Sorry, yeah. I just like in regard to solutions also, right? I mean, most of the times, and if you spend enough time with the communities, there are certain solutions that exist within. For example, like when I go on field, a lot of communities, a lot of people have started tying clothes around their water bottle to keep the water cold, because of course thermal bottle is not available, right? It's expensive. So what you do is you sew your own cloth to a way that it becomes a protective layer to the bottle. And a
Mm.
lot of people have now turned to earthen pots back in home, to something that we've always been using. But and also just on the fact of, like, because it is global south and a lot of visuals end up being dehumanized, I also make a point to always include always include like a holistic image. So for example, here there are these women who are taking a break within their day, within their farming day, and they're making Instagram reels. I mean, just a day of break making Instagram reels. And sometimes I feel like, because like we're only, especially within India, we only show people in, like, we'll go and shoot the utmost poor people, which I think is the worst that somebody can do. Or to shoot a woman. I think a holistic image, even within heat, is so important, to be able to show an individual's life holistically, that it is extreme heat, but this person also has a fuller life like anybody else, and which is why it deserves a better.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. And, you know, I mean, the truth is this extreme heat is affecting many, many people. It'll be affecting us. You know, these are people just like us, except for, you know, having been born or living in a different situation. It's worth keeping that in mind. Um, Olivia, I wanted to come to you. You've been shooting in hot places, you know, among them West Africa. And how much planning does it take to really get these kind of images that you're shooting, you know, working ahead of time to get into the right places to shoot them and building ties with communities and that kind of thing?
Yeah, hello everyone. So I was thinking about this, and I have two sort of main points. One is that this is also partly from recent experience. So I'm freelance and I work for lots of different people. And I was recently doing some photos for WFP in Sierra Leone. And it's really hard to take good photos at the height of the day. So what happens is you go with a team of other people from WFP, they drive you for 5 hours, you get to a rice field, and you're told to take photos of these women harvesting rice, but it's midday, and they're like, right, you've got half an hour, take amazing photos and come back to us. And it's really hard to take good photos outside in somewhere like Sierra Leone at like midday, 1 o'clock, because the sun's just too high, people's faces are shadowed. I mean, there are ways you can take a flash and things, but it's quite difficult to get good natural shots at that time. So then you have the challenge that you want to showcase the extreme heat. The hottest time of day is then. So you want your subjects, I mean, you don't want to wish ill on your subjects, but you need your subjects to be looking hot to be reacting to the heat. So you have to pick a time of day, basically, that the sun's not too high, but it's also hot enough to showcase what you're trying to show. So I mean, for that, I guess like probably 3 p.m. when the sun's a bit lower, but it's still hot. So I think timing is the first thing, like plan what time you're going to get the images, because light is as every photographer knows, light is crucial. And then the second thing is access. Like, again, using the example of Sierra Leone, I recently took some photos for Climate Resilience for All in Sierra Leone, and there were photos in a marketplace of women selling food in the markets in the heat, and there was this one of these. It was a very good climate solution of these heat-proof panels they'd installed. The city council with the support of Climate Resilience for All. And so I went to take photos of people under these covers. But from experience in West Africa, people in marketplaces really hate being photographed. And I don't know why it's particularly marketplaces, but like in Sierra Leone, for example, people are very open and usually happy to be photographed. But in marketplaces, women really shout at you. And so I went with a Sierra Leonean friend. I made sure to go a bit ahead of time and introduce myself to the local official. So there was Chief Fafana, who was the local official for this particular area of the city. And then once she'd given me her blessing, then I could approach women saying, "Hi, I'm here. I've introduced myself to the local official, and do you mind if I take some photos of you?" And then usually it was okay. But I think just blundering in there into a hot marketplace in the height of the day with women feeling hot and stressed and trying to sell food, and just taking photos is counterproductive because everyone will be glaring and shouting at you.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I think that planning issue is just so crucial because it's the same thing with a school or a hospital or something. You know how hard it is to get into these places to take pictures. I mean, any photographer knows that. But it's really something if you can spend the time going ahead of the heat wave, talking to people a little bit, explaining what you're trying to show and why, getting people on your side, and then maybe when the day comes, they'll let you join that ambulance crew or they'll let you, get into the school to do something. It's tricky, but I think there
Yeah.
are ways if you persist, and particularly if you can look at heat again, not as a day, going out on a hot day to shoot, but it's something you might want to cover as a bigger story. I think here in the UK, for instance, my kids went to the local school where I volunteer, and it's so hot now at the time that they take exams. And this school has really not got fans. It's got windows that open, and you just think this is going to affect results. And it's certainly sapping not only the kids but the teachers. Imagine trying to manage all these kids all day in the heat. It requires some real systemic thinking, I think, about how we manage these threats. And the kind of stories you can tell with that longer term approach, I think, feed into that. I'm curious to hear from each of you about a heat image that you've taken that you're really proud of and why and what you did to get that one. So anybody wants to go first? Okay, Olivia.
I'm happy to. So the photo, I was recently doing an assignment for Al Jazeera on an island off the coast of Sierra Leone again. And I wanted to convey the atmosphere as well as anything. Like, it's incredibly hot and incredibly humid and incredibly muggy. And the story was about young men who dive for sea cucumbers, which is a precious marine commodity. So they go out at night and they dive for sea cucumbers. And I wanted to just show, like, I wanted to create an atmosphere with the photo. And I have this photo of a young man, and it's quite hard to take good photos in low light. So I was proud of this one because one of the sea cucumber divers was there in his wetsuit, heading down to the water, and he was carrying a bunch of stuff that he needed because they dive for these sea cucumbers at night. And so he was going down to the water at night to go on his nighttime dive to dive for these like sea slugs that they sell in China as food. And he was absolutely dripping in sweat. And he was in his wetsuit and dripping in sweat. And I just caught this photo of him in the dark, heading down to the dive, his face covered in sweat, looking quite sort of stunned. And it just, for me, because it was one of the things that stood out from my memory of the story when I was trying to create the story afterwards. One of the things is that this place is extremely hot. There's no electricity on the island. And, people have to work. And here's a guy wearing a half zipped up wetsuit and like sweating buckets, basically. Yeah.
Ali, is there any image you can think of that you were really happy when you saw it come in? And
Yeah, there's quite a few examples. I mean, I think I've been really happy when I've seen like a photographer gain that access to where there, you can tell there's a level of trust there between the subject and the photographer. So that might, so an example that often gets thrown out is like people who have to work outside, like construction workers or whatever, but the same thing, like you roll up on a work crew and start taking pictures, that's not going to work. So there was an excellent story done in Houston, basically, of people who are working in an auto body shop. That was great. I really like that. And then also seeing bureaus figure out how to find access into essentially hospitals or do ride-alongs with EMT crews, sometimes also at night or hard times of the day. Like they weren't our most used photos, but I think it's important that we offer that breadth, and also the bureau was able to build out a short text story around it, so that helps as well.
yeah, that's fantastic. It's not only shooting them, but making sure they get used, which I know is the tension. Thomas, is there any picture you're proud of or one that is memorable for you?
Yeah, but maybe not in Spain, but I lived during many years in the Middle East. So I was based in Jerusalem, and I took a picture during a sandstorm, during a very hot day, and with people protect themselves with camels. So it's, but with this yellow light and this haze sound, it's yeah, it's an ambience I like for this one. But
Yeah, it really evokes the heat.
yeah, so but it's another level, in the Middle East. It's like in Africa or in India. It's worse than Europe.
Yeah. But I know you've, there was one of yours we put up in there that I kind of like, especially where it's quite hazy, kind of the picture of women walking along, and you really get that sense of heat. It's so hard to catch that, how hot it feels because it's invisible. And I thought that one did a good job of it. What are you proud of and that you've shot just briefly?
No, so even every time I make a larger edit, I try to include at least one that has that hazy element, because when I am shooting, I am mostly like I remember I am almost about to faint. And that is the emotion with which I shoot. Like I know that when I am trying to shoot this, I am not in my best physical state. Like I know I will go and drink an electrolyte, right after this. And in this moment, I know that when I wake up, when I sit and I get up to take another shot, I know that for a second I'm not in my body. So I just wanted to capture that element. And because I know that if I'm feeling it, I'm sure the person in front of me is also feeling it. Which is why I captured that hazy, that haziness, because that really speaks of your mental state, and also because heat just affects so much mentally. You don't feel like doing anything, you don't feel like going out, you don't feel like stepping out. It's all a little hazy, so it was just that emotion. But my favorite one is actually a different one. My favorite one is actually because I do get to spend more time thinking and planning ahead. This year, I've actually spent more time making these other connections to heat. So I happen to go to central India, where it's not like extreme temperature was not like they had their own extreme temperature in different parts. So I went there to cover a protest. That was because two wonderful, beautiful women, once, when I was there, pointed at a mountain, and they were like, ever since we've had illegal mining here, we've not had rain. And that was just making it too much hot for them. And how something like mining is causing that overall heat, or that other industrial work is causing that intense heat, was a connection that I was interested in. And so this was a protest visual uh, from central India, where the indigenous community was like, we don't want you to cut our trees anymore. We can't bear these rising temperatures and all of this. And I thought that this photo would never be agreed to as a heat visual, which is why usually some of these are only taken by professors to teach in the universities. Like I'm usually only called by teachers, but these hardly get published because not everybody is willing to have that connective conversation of
Yeah.
how is our planet's temperature rising. That is the overall heat conversation also. It's not just about today, it's the temperature is rising, but how are we leading to here? If after 50 years is going to rise, is it because we will not have all these forests will be gone?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
is that not a heat story?
Yeah. The connections are so important to point out. I'm curious how you're handling, any of you who are shooting in the field, how you handle heat. How do you keep your crews and your equipment cool enough? Have you had problems with that, or is it mostly been okay? Anybody?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah. I'm suffering more myself and my equipment. So no, the professional equipment is, is working well for extreme temperature. Is the same for the very low temperature. But no,
how do you
it's
manage?
yeah, yeah, with a lot of water for yourself, the cap and everything, and you stay also on the shade, and you you place yourself in the shade, and you took pictures of people, and maybe in the sun,
Do you
under the
ever do you
sun.
ever take cooling equipment along with you for your, or like cool packs or anything for your equipment when you're shooting, or
No,
has it been
no,
okay?
I'm turning off the cameras when I'm finished to shoot a series of pictures, and like this,
Okay.
it's you can save some batteries and elements of the camera.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, Olivia.
I am now better at coping in heat because I've made massive blunders in the past. Like one that particularly comes to mind was that I was taking photos actually, Ali, for Reuters in the president's inauguration in Congo, and I was in a rush and I assumed that there would be water at the event. And in order to get to the front to take the photos, you had to fight through this massive crowd. And it was unbelievably hot. And there was nobody selling water in the area close to where he was about to be inaugurated. And I knew that if I went out and got water, I was going to miss the moment and I was going to be in trouble. And so I mean, in the end, a very nice fellow journalist shared a bit of his water with me, but it was really dire, and I was just kind of absolutely chastising myself. Like, how did I come to this event without a massive bottle of water? I should never have assumed that it was just going to be easy to buy it at the venue. So now, yeah, lots of water, extra battery packs, because sometimes I take photos with a drone and my my phone attaches to the drone and I use it as the screen. And it keeps just turning off when it's really hot. Like it goes down to like 20% and then it will just turn off. And that's quite scary because then you can lose the drone because your drone's in the air and suddenly you've got no way to operate it. So yeah, extra batteries for sure as well. Water, battery packs.
Ali, are you giving advice to with your advice about visuals? Are you giving any of that kind of advice to your teams?
Me directly, no, but yes, like photo editors, bureaus, and it's also included in some of the safety guidance that
Yeah.
is happening right now, especially if you're also covering something like a wildfire, so the effective heat. So it's in conversation, but it'd be a better question for the bureaus, especially the bureaus that are
Yeah.
super hot. Yeah.
Bhumika.
I think this year because we've done more filming than just photographs. So for that, we were just like, no, we need an air conditioned car where we can keep all our equipments because after a point they would just not work. Like they were so even if we don't have access to air condition, we need to have a car that has access to air condition where we can cool our equipments down. So I like as far as I can remember, that's I think one thing that we did, and always carrying an umbrella. And also like that also increases your crew size, especially if you're, which is very hard if you're just by yourself and photographing, but if you're filming, I think we dedicatedly had people just to help us with like like making sure there was shade, yeah, when we were shooting because I mean it was just, yeah, like our cameras would go off after a point because it was intense heat. But always carrying electrolytes like is like something that I was like, I am somebody, I'm like my entire crew 5 times, electrolytes, guys, drink electrolytes. So like, yeah, just making sure that, yeah, because it can get very lethal and you can just snap out, and that is even worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think knowing the signs of heat stress, in what those are, kind of, dizziness or you get confusion, nausea, things like that, or it's really worth paying attention to because it's a sign you need to go sit down in the shade almost no matter what you're doing. But though, Olivia, I know it might be tough when you're trying to get that photo in the front. So, I wanted to, just before we go to questions, I wanted to ask each of you for basically one, or you can sneak maybe a second one, piece of advice you would give other photographers out there who may be listening, to take better images of this threat. What have you learned that you think is worth sharing with others who may be trying to do this and do some of the work that you're doing? Anybody want to go first? Olivia, go ahead.
It's probably a really obvious one that everyone's thought of already, but it's just I've taken so many photos in the past in hot environments that actually don't showcase the heat because, as you've said, it is invisible. And so it's very easy to take a photo that it's 40 degrees, but you can't really tell. And the best way to tell is obviously to have people in the frame. So have people who are sweating, who are, show that it's difficult to be around in these kind of temperatures and have human subjects seeking shades, wearing like covers on their heads, drinking water, sweating, like all of this. I think for me is the most sort of obvious way to showcase heat.
Yeah.
Yeah, going off that, I was saying to our photographers, like, if you're going to shoot a fountain, if it's kids playing in the fountain, that connotates play. But if it's like adults in the fountain with all their clothes on, that connotates stress to me. So, like, I'm talking in a Western Europe context specifically, where we see a lot of these sorts of tourist photos. So that, to me, that's kind of a line between when is it extreme and when is it fun.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thomas or Bhumika.
Go ahead, Ulrike. Yeah?
So I still think that planning ahead and building long-term equation really just makes a lot of difference because the story lies in those details for me, for somebody like me. So that is the only advice. Like plan ahead would be the only advice. Yeah. And get close and it'll show in the photo. So just that. Yeah.
Thomas.
Yeah, get close is very important, but you can going close by yourself or with a zoom or with a lens can help you for this. But I think it's also important to play with the good lights. So lights are at the morning or at the end of the day, or maybe better for have a better picture. And you can play with silhouette people and yeah, and some background with lights and or the, so it's depends where you live, of course.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there's really so many different things. I think, like you said, getting close to people, you can sometimes show even without the faces, just hand
Mm,
people. I've seen pictures of people with hands really, burned by the sun or what they're having to do. Like you were talking about Bhumika with the people wearing gloves despite the terrible heat. And I think we've all seen some of those pretty good images of people lined up in the shade, like that one shot of the people walking up the stairs, and everyone
yeah,
is over on the far left-hand side in the shade. It conveys pretty well, right, that it's hot. I think it's looking at that and also really remembering to shoot this not solutions to it, but the ways that people are coping because I think those make good pictures and they're really interesting and they educate people a little bit about what works and show that there is stuff you can do about it so it's not all gloomy. So yeah, I mean, I think those are useful things. I wanted to now turn to some questions. If you haven't put your question in yet for our panelists, please go ahead. I'm going to take this first one from Joe Lowe. What do the panel think about photos of ambulances, hospitals, and that, like that were used for the COVID pandemic and other health stories? Are those good heat images or not? Anybody want to take that?
Uh,
Thomas or Ali? Either one.
no, Thomas, go ahead first, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah. What do you mean about ambulances pictures?
I think he's just talking about, there were a lot of those during COVID, and does it accurately portray the heat risk? I mean, I guess I would argue it probably does, but I'm curious. He's got a question about that.
Yeah, it's a part of the story, of course, and that's only a part. So you have to. I think it's the presence of a human. It's a better picture. So, but it's you have to show your story with different part of the if people are suffering, of course, there is some medical actions. So it's could be ambulance, could be at the hospital, could be and,
Yeah, I think it's also
emergency.
worth considering like whether it's one image that's your story, because if it's one image, then the ambulance itself might not be it. But I think in a set of images about what's going on, I think that works reasonably well. But it is worth thinking about what your client or who you're photographing for is going to want. Ali?
Yeah, I had to cover the extreme heat rapid evolution mortality study today. So I think we're going to all be, this is what I'm going to say about like my tip as well. Like if this is a topic of interest for you, you can just be assured you're going to be covering extreme heat for as long as you're going to be working as a photographer on assignment, because the trajectory is going in one direction. So this is a recurring story. I think right now there might be some part of the public and some editors who don't yet make that link between the health implications of heat and the fact that people are dying or visiting emergency rooms. But I think it's only a matter of years at max before people have enough even firsthand experience of this in the communities that they live, that this connection starts to make more sense. So I'm for it. But yeah, it will be a blend, and as a standalone image, I'm not sure if it will work just yet. I also apologize, everyone. I have to run, but thank you for
Thank you
including
so
me.
much
Okay.
for joining. I really appreciate it. Bye, Ali. Yeah, it's it's hard to know if that's the single image, but yeah, I do think people are understanding that heat is more of a risk. There was a super interesting study that came out from a YouGov polling agency here in the UK, where we're known for all the rain, right, and the bad weather. So people are generally joyous when it's very sunny and hot out. And they found for the first time that more people are worried about heat waves than looking forward to them. And that's particularly strong among young people in the UK, which is, fascinating. So I think it is turning, that understanding about what a really hot sunny day is switching, but it's taking time, and it depends on the place and that kind of thing. Sadly, our other question was asking if there's asking Allison if she'd be able to share her list of non-cliched images of heat. I would love if any of you who are panelists, if you've got links to your work or to things that you think that people on this webinar would be interested in or could use as reference as they start to think about their own heat images, I would encourage you to stick them into the chat, just so there are places. I know Climate Visuals, who help in the UK, who I was working together with their manager on our own principles for better heat images. They have an open access library of some heat images that they're trying to build up. So that's one place to look. And they're hoping to build that into something where they can have better heat images, available for people that need them, at the last moment, kind of more generic images. Anybody else have a question? I think we've got, oh, there's one more. Lizzie says it would be cool to hear about photo stories and collections of photos people have worked on about heat, telling the story in unusual ways, like Bhumika. We probably got time for one short example of that if anybody wants to tell us a story beyond what we've already talked about.
I mean, I can maybe go ahead because I do a
Yeah,
lot of.
she's talking about groups of images, like telling a story rather than the single image. Does anybody, if nobody else wants to go, we'll hear from Bhumika. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I also think that there are so many other sides to heat that have not been photographed yet. For example, how does heat affect, a certain soil in a certain land? And one could do a photo story about that. How is that affecting crop? How is that affecting the people around it? I think that could be a very interesting photo story. How is the heat affecting a certain species of maybe a plant? Because in India, I mean, a lot of our plants just get burnt in heat, like they're just burnt out, right? Like I see my mother, my grandmother, and me, like we're just pulling all our plants inside, as soon as there's heat. There could be just a story about that. There are so many other different ways to tell, unusual ways to tell, because it just not does not just affect us, but in so many ways the soil we stand on, the air around, like so many other things. So that could be, I think, a possibility.
Yeah, we often talk to people about how, heat affects almost everything you're concerned about. And I mean, I'm in London where Wimbledon is going on this week, and we're watching players and people watching really struggle. We've had people die at concerts now of heat stroke around the world. And, there's talk that maybe the Summer Olympics need to move to a cooler month in the year because it's too hot. Lots of cultural events are really being affected by this heat. And religious things like the Hajj. We saw all those deaths on the Hajj in Mecca. So I think, it affects our health, it affects economic issues. Productivity losses are huge. When people don't sleep at night and they end up going to work the next day, they make mistakes. They can cause accidents. There's a lot of different aspects of this. So I think almost anyone on any beat can look at where heat is intersecting with that. Some of it's really clear, like farming and agriculture and health, but other things are also happening that are really important. Um, so we're just about at time here. I wanted to just say thanks so much to all of you, the panelists who joined us, and all the rest of you out there who are interested in this. I just think it's really important, and I hope this has been useful, at least a little bit, in helping you rethink. We'll continue to have resources on our website, and I think feel free to go and look at the websites of our panelists. I think they've put some of those in the chat for ideas. And, we're just happy to hear from you too if you'd like advice. You can see those guidelines that we posted earlier on our site. I think that link is in the chat. And we should have the video of this available to share around with others who might be interested in time. So good luck out there shooting, and please stay safe. And if you think you've got some great images, there's another thing you can do. Check out the Extreme Heat Photo Contest that the Global Heat Health Information Network has open now. You can go find out more at their site, but that might be a place to both show off your images and look at some new ones, as well as on our own Climate Resilience for All site, where we've been trying to put these principles into practice, working with a range of photographers, including Bhumika and Olivia. Thanks so much for your time. Take care.